We're good, Pat.
Well, good morning, councillors, staff and members in the public gallery. Due to COVID restrictions regarding gatherings and the need to comply with social distancing measures, council wishes to advise that there are limits to the number of attendances in the public gallery. Federation Council wishes to advise members of the public gallery that council meetings will be recorded and will be available after each meeting on council's website. All care will be taken to maintain the privacy of those in attendance. However, as a visitor in the public gallery, your presence may be recorded. By remaining in the public gallery, it is assumed your consent is given in the event of your image is broadcast. This includes any filming by television cameras if attendance is approved by the General Manager or Mayor. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land which we are meeting today, the Bangarang people, and acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who now reside in this area. I extend that respect to elders, past and present, of the Bangarang nations. I'll now call for apologies and applications for leave of absence by councillors. Any apologies?
Haven't received any.
Number 4 is confirmation of minutes. Confirmation of minutes of the ordinary meeting on the 19th of October 2021. Would someone like to move that, please? Moved by Councillor Kennedy, seconded by Councillor Meagle. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. And confirmation of minutes of the extraordinary meeting held on the 2nd of November 2021. Moved by Councillor Wales, seconded by Councillor Thomas. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Disclosures of interest.
Haven't received any.
Haven't received any. The Merrill Minute, there have been no items. We now have, we'll bring forward item 8.3. It's a presentation of audited annual financial statements for the year ending 30 June 2021. Can we have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Kennedy, seconded by Councillor Meagle. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Thanks, Brad.
No worries, Mayor. Thank you. Good morning again. Brad Barnes is my name. We've met each other before a couple of times with the closeout of the Statement of Financial Position or Council's financial statements. You've got a balance date of 30 June, so it's early November and the process is wrapped up. The deadline from an OLG perspective was that councils needed to have their financial statements finished and lodged by the end of October, and Federation Council again achieved that. So it was really pleasing. It was perhaps a little bit of activity at the last minute that made Shane a little nervous, but it was safely lodged on time. So that's a really pleasing outcome. On time and clean or unqualified audit opinions. So that was what our goal was at the start of the process, and so we achieved that outcome. There are several other councils in the state that still remain outstanding and haven't been done. So then relative to your peers, the result's nice in isolation, but then relative to the other peer group, you're certainly well in front of a number of New South Wales councils who've had challenges with access to valuers in COVID has been a challenge, and then access to finance staff to execute the process towards the end of the year. So those two things combined mean there's a number of councils that still weren't completed by the end of October. In terms of the presentation today, there are 2 items that go in your financial statements available for the public. There's a very boring commodity-based audit opinion which says your financial statements are true and fair. The wording is straight out of the auditing standard and very much commodity-based. There's no variability in there. The free-form report is the report on the conduct, and it goes for 5 or 6 pages and includes some commentary from the Audit Office on the wellbeing of Council's financial state of affairs. The key item tagged in there on page 1, Council's one of a series of rural regional councils who haven't recognised their RFS assets. This is a contentious item, but Federation Council's not alone in its stance. So Council has the view that pragmatically they don't control these assets. You can't dictate and control where they go and what they do. And so under that basis, you've said that they're not controlled, hence we're not putting them on our balance sheet. A different school of thought is legal form, where there's an RFS agreement which suggests that those assets vest with council. Then there's a linkage between vesting equaling control. So there's a couple of different perspectives coming together, and the audit office is using the legal thought process of vesting. Councils are using the thought process of pragmatic control, and at the moment those two items aren't on common ground. So council haven't recognised them. You're not alone there. You're something like 60 odd councils in that space who haven't brought them to account. And I'm aware there's a meeting scheduled for later, might be early next week, between BDO, who's given some accounting advice to Leeton Shire, who are leading the charge on this item, and the audit office to see whether there can be some further progress made regarding this stalemate, really, is the situation we're at the moment. So it's been called out as a high-risk item in the fact that council haven't done it, but again, I'd flag for you, Federation Council's not unique in this space. You're the same as around 60 other councils who haven't recognised this particular item. The key item in terms of metrics for council, you've got two things, an income statement and a balance sheet. Your income statement's heavily influenced by rates and annual charges, and the cap last year was 2.6%. Yours have gone up by 4.1, so it means there's the rate cap of 2.6 plus a small increase in rateable properties in the Greater Shire area. And then aside from that is grants and contributions. They have remained relatively consistent. We did get some developer contributions, quite a sizable developer contributions in the 2020 year, and they come off a little bit in the 21 year. So that's mainly the decrease that you can see in grants and contributions was non-cash assets. The level of non-cash assets that got contributed to council in 2020 wasn't to the same extent, and it does vary around as development activities vary. The key thing to take away from the profit result is that council's operations trade to a loss. So we've got a loss from continuing operations, which means our expenses are more than our income. That's okay in any one-off year, but as it's a recurring item, yeah, there we go. Middle of the page, operating result from continuing operations is negative 3.5, and last year it was almost $1 million. So that's the worrying trend, and I think that's the link through to the extensive work that's been done about cash, future revenue streams, and ultimately an SRV, which is in play. The next page talks about cash flow. The key thing to call out on this page would be that council got new debt during the year, which you should recall was about 5.1 million. So the bar to the far right is what that is, and you can see we're starting to have some activity in our borrowing space. Fundamentally, the other two graphs are rates and contributions and grants come in, and then we either spend it on capital assets, or if the capital plan's not up to that, we invest it in term deposits. And then it comes back as the plan keeps up. But that's pretty consistent with every other rural and regional council. The main difference for you guys is the activity you can see happening out the far right with the new borrowings in the 21 year. This bottom section here is the focus of the Central Coast Council and dealing in unrestricted funds and going into negative. Council's got a healthy balance of cash and cash equivalents there of around 35 odd million, 38 million, but it's restricted. External restrictions are water and sewer. Internal restrictions are plant replacement reserve, employee leave reserves and carryover works programs, leaving you with an unrestricted balance. What you can see is there's a stark increase in both external restrictions and internal restrictions this year, as council management have better positioned council for where things are up to with funding obligations. In terms of accounting currently for revenue, it's a bit problematic. We don't match it. A lot of your grants are recorded as income upon receipt, primarily the FAG grant, and at the moment we're in advance on the FAG grant. What council have done here is actually restrict away the funds that are received in advance and have gone to income, so that we've got the funds that we're obliged to spend in future years, and that's when the expense would come through. And we are sitting positive in unrestricted cash, but you can see from there it's a somewhat fragile existence of being break even, but we have put further monies into both external and internal restrictions, which is the more prudent measure. So of all the lines in there of the report, that's the important one, the increase in internal restrictions where council's better positioned itself for its forward obligations. The next pages go through the performance measures. Now, these were the T Corp ones around Fit for the Future. Your operating performance ratio is below the red bar, but not as down as the prior year. And this own source operating revenue, pretty much every regional rural council is below the bar. They use one metric for the whole state, being 60%. We have a fair amount of grant activity, and any improvement in this by a reduction in grant activity would drag that one down further. And so that's not the scenario we're looking for. So our picture is, I think council is quite comfortable to have a result below the 60% bar, and you can see the consistency year on year. Because if we tried to address the own source operating thing, unless you can introduce paid parking or some kind of other user pays type scenario, you're not going to get the operating performance to a break even. So we need the grant activity. Unrestricted current ratio. So you can actually see an improvement here on the next page, where council now is at the stage of having the far right column says we've got about $2.80 of current assets for every dollar of current liabilities. So that means we can pay our debts as and when they fall due, and you can see that gradual improvement that's stepping through there. So that's the financial management work that's being done in the background to further strengthen and support council's activities. And our debt service cover ratio, the reason why that's dropping down, and importantly between 2020 and 21, is that new $5.1 million loan that we took out. So it's measuring the percentage of our revenue that goes towards making principal and interest repayments. And if you take out a new $5 million loan, it's going to have a decrease on your capacity to pay. And then finally, rates and annual charges outstanding percentage. The measure's set at 10% for rural and regional councils. We've got a really good result at Federation. It's well below that. It's consistent, which demonstrates you've got solid debt recovery procedures in place. And this last measure is saying if we turned off the revenue tap, how many months of expenses could you pay with no more incoming revenue? And that result is 14.6 months. The red bar is set at 3 months or 90 days, the assumption being you could go to the bank and organise alternate finance in 90 days. So well above the break-even measure. And then this section here is again, really your story. You've got a large road network to maintain, and Federation last year did the new pool. So there was around 3.7 million in direct renewals for swimming pools in the 21 year. So significant activity in terms of infrastructure, property, plant and equipment renewal in the 21 year. There were no instances of legislative non-compliance, so Michael Kazu was kind enough to sign out our conduct report, albeit pretty late on the 29th of October. But happy to take any questions. It really was. We probably do need to flag COVID was a thing again at the time of year-end testing, so there was finance team's ability to adapt and engage with us in a electronic way as opposed to the traditional eyeballing the auditor and the finance team was much appreciated and certainly helped us get to the finish line as things moved around.
Thank you. Any questions or comments, councillors? Councillor Meagle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Brad. If I can just go back to the own source revenue, council was the beneficiary of a large grant from the New South Wales government to upgrade the sale yards, and councils then supported that. And is there then the potential that by future-proofing and improving that sale yards that we could improve that own source revenue and therefore help balance out the operating? Is that where, are we in the right track going that way?
It's certainly a source of revenue funds. I don't think it will necessarily, that step alone won't correct the metric up there, but it's one of the opportunities, and it is one that you've supported from council in terms of it's a source of own source revenue. So the challenge with doing the improvements though is the capital items also trigger a depreciation outcome, and so it's that the devil's depreciation always, if you're getting a capital grant, how that pulls through. But it certainly is, the nature of any grant activity you're doing should be through the lens, is it revenue positive for council? And if it's not revenue positive for council, there's a pause point as to whether you actually want to push forward with it. That seems to be the current thinking that's happening amongst the rural regional councils at this point. Because at the moment, we're awash with grants, aren't we? But the devil of the detail is, if it just triggers a whopping big, if the asset's going to be underutilised and it's got a big depreciation annual charge chasing it through, why would you do it?
Correct. Thank you very much.
Brad, I suppose the first thing I'd say is 60% realistic as far as own source revenue. When you look at, as you said, parking meters and a lot of public space that's charged for in metropolitan or cities. So I would have thought, somewhere up around that 50% is tracking fairly well.
It's a solid outcome. You're exactly right. So 60% is a statewide metric, which takes in all the city councils, and there's very few, if any, rural regional councils that are hitting that 60%, certainly consistently. Maybe one year they might bounce up there, but it's a bar that's set too high, and there's ongoing advocacy work about having it. The problem is, if they broke it down, they probably can't go to two. They'd need to go to one for county councils, one for rural councils, one for regional councils, and then there'd be all the arguments about, well, which bucket am I in type thing.
Yeah.
So it's an awkward spot, but 60% is not realistic relative to what we are.
And probably the second point I'd raise is we've been through a period of bringing massive assets, to fruition in the last 4 years, which, as we know, affects our depreciation big time. When you talk 3.5 million deficit, would it be fair to say that depreciation is the major factor there?
It's certainly a significant chunk of it. Depreciation last year was 13.4 million. And it's certainly it's not flatlining. Depreciation is increasing each year. So 13.5 million as an accounting charge, like it's just a journal entry. That's a big hurdle to get over.
Yeah, and I think that journal entry, it has to be there. But to go forward into the future, which is what council plan to do, you have to have those borrowings and build those assets for a future.
Yes,
and then they pan out hopefully as you build your future. So I just don't see it as a negative.
Yes,
as such.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Futuristic. Yeah. Any further questions?
Yeah, I noted we wrote off 8.5 million in roads this year too, which would have upset the balance sheet a little bit as well, wouldn't it?
When you say wrote off 8.5 million
In depreciation, wouldn't it?
It increased.
Oh, so yes, that's right, for impairment of roads that were redone. Yes, 100%. That also has an impact. Yeah. But a little bit, that's also something of a recurring item as opposed to it just being a one-off item.
Yeah, right.
It's the nature of, because you've got such a large road network that you're doing, as periodically we go out and want to redo that road, well, the first thing we're doing is kind of destroying is not the right word, but as we're renewing that road, the first thing we're doing is taking down the existing value that's there and then putting it back.
Yes, yeah.
And some of the modelling that the engineering team especially have done with finance around our gap in our road infrastructure and our building facilities waste, but especially our roads, is around that 3 million odd to address what we see as just an ongoing maintenance requirement. We need to get reseals and a lot more resheeting and that sort of work done, and that's sort of about that gap in our operating position as well with that depreciation. So that's sort of our journey ahead as to how we improve our funding onto our roads especially.
One thing you've achieved ruined my Sunday reading that.
Oh, sorry. Imagine my Sundays, I do about 14 of these.
Councillors, if no further questions? If there's not...
I'd just like to really thank the team, and especially Joe and Shane. Shane's in the room here with us, but any supporting finance staff as well, councillors, Councillor Meagle and our Audit and Risk Committee. It's been, I think, as was stated at the Audit Committee, it's been an improvement each year, like in performance, not only on the books, but also just in our compliance and meeting those obligations as much as COVID's challenged it. But I think it's a credit to the staff as well, and well done to Joe and the team. And as I mentioned in one of those meetings, the entire organisation's really worked hard to restrain costs, and I think that's shown in some of those areas, and increasingly updating our long-term financial plan to reflect changes as they happen. So I'm really happy with where the year's got to from that performance as well. So well done to Joe and the team.
Yeah, and I'd like to support that as well. Brad, fantastic, really good job, and great work to get everything done and precision timing, and Shane, and Of course, Joe and your team, it's just amazing when you sit here and look at the security going forward that you've been able to bring into play for the council, and I suppose the clarity in our financials, knowing exactly where we're at. I think there wouldn't be anyone around the room that wouldn't have a good idea where council sits, and I know it's caused problems in different departments. Cutbacks always do. Councillors probably haven't got all the lollies they intended to get off you, Joe, but you've done a really good job, so congratulations and well done to you all.
Thanks, mate.
Just need a move and second now.
Yes, moved by Councillor Meagle, seconded by Councillor Thomas. All in favour? Against, carried. Thank you.
Good on you, bud.
Yeah, we'll go back to the agenda. Thanks, Mr Mayor. 7.1, General Manager's Report is a Lockhart Shire support request for an initiative known as Tim Fisher Way. So the recommendations there is to note the report on the proposed naming of the route from the farm once owned by the late Tim Fisher AC through Borey Creek and onto Lockhart as Tim Fisher Way, and to endorse this proposal. So I'm happy to discuss that if that gets moved and seconded.
Moved by Councillor Whitechurch, seconded by Councillor Longley. Questions or comments, councillors?
So yeah, basically the Lockhart Shire had, I think they went earlier in the piece through the tourism stakeholder sort of networks through the state and endorsed that, but they were unsuccessful, I think, in an earlier round, but to seek the support of council and to look at, I guess, just calling it a way and not going through the whole process of renaming the road is where they're looking to do that now. And I think it just value adds on to the great work this council's done out there with the renaming of the park, thankfully while Tim was still alive and with us. And then following on from that, the amazing statue by Andrew Whitehead of Tim and that event. So we see this, and then Lockhart have always had a great focus on Tim and likewise. So they've got the museum over there and things like that. So I think if we could support this, it just builds on our tourism product across the region, Lockhart ourselves and further afield.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? If not, I'll put it all in favour.
No.
Against, carried.
7.2 is the Federation Council End of Term Report. So this provides Council with the End of Term Report for the Council elected term. Recommendation is to note the report, and again, happy to discuss and elaborate a little bit in the report if I may.
So moved by Councillor Thomas, seconded by Councillor Kennedy.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. So this report is required under the New South Wales Government's integrated planning and reporting legislation. So essentially it's a status report on this council's term towards the objectives in our 10-year community strategic plan. So the CSP was revisited, as council would be aware, shortly after your election, as will be the case with the new council as well. So that was revisited and adopted back in July 1, 2018. So the council were in and re-engaged and worked away through this term at those objectives, and then through our 3-year delivery program and our 1-year operating plan that we update each year. So the report outlines quite a lot of end of term achievement highlights. The end of a council term also, some of this information will come through our annual report each year that we're required to do as well, which we'll discuss later, which includes our financial statements as we've just received. But certainly this end of term report looks at the whole term of council, an extra year put on top of that with COVID delays, and then an extra few months as well. So there's quite a detailed list of achievements here that council's been able to deliver. It's ran through our themes from our CSP of built federation and economic federation, natural, social and well governed. It talks to our community satisfaction survey, which we took in 2020, and we do that every 2 years. So there's some good benchmarking in there. And there's also some discussion on where to for the next Federation Council as they go forward post the election. And some really, we think some really big highlights for the council term, especially as noted even by our auditor on our capital investment, which does grow the communities and it does address backlog, but it also provides, those depreciation costs as well. But certainly a growth projection for the Shire is looking really positive. We know where to ahead as far as our challenges in continuing to maintain our road network and other areas, but certainly I think this council's worked really solidly together over the term with the staff, our executive as well, and all our staff, dealing with things like, it's easy to forget, but the couple of years of the worst drought for a long time, and coupled with COVID, and I think to still maintain our services as solidly as we have has been a credit to all. So yeah, that's there for council's notation and discussion.
Thank you. Any comments, councillors? Councillor Thomas.
This is really just commentary in and around the community strategic plan. As you know, it is one of our key backbone documents for us sitting here in chamber and for our community. And this comment really is just to go out to our community. When you have the opportunity to have input into your capital letters, explanation mark, community strategic plan, please do so. It is the opportune time to gain that feedback, gain that stakeholder input. And I can't implore enough to our community and ratepayers to do that when it comes their turn again early next year. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Meagle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's the report's really interesting because you get a chance to reflect on where the last 4 years have gone, and they seem to go rather quickly, as we all noticed. And to see what actually has been achieved for the benefit of the community, the challenges that we faced, as the General Manager has alluded to. I think one thing that's probably not highlighted there is that part of the grant funding that we received was the $5 million to be used internally for the merger of the two councils. And I need to publicly state that I was very impressed with the way the council used that internal money, such as the long-term financial plan, the connection of the between Urana offices and Cora offices. It was used very wisely, and it has set us up and provided some of the backbone that has allowed us to go forward. Yes, we've delivered lots of great assets for the local community, but that use of the merger money internally, I thought was very wisely used, and it has provided a good backbone going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Meagle. Councillor Longmire.
Yeah, I'd say in the report here, in regard to the going forward with the community expectation of service delivery, asset renewal and maintenance, specifically in the rural sector with the road network, I think it's very important that council go forward with the opportunity to negotiate and not negotiate. Yeah, that's a form of discussion with the people in the rural sector that will effectively make a big difference. Going with the everywhere we look on these reports, it's about the lack of funding for the road maintenance. We all know that, but going forward, I think it's so important that we sort of deal with the people out there that. Certainly they've got a wonderful harvest looking at them, and hopefully it doesn't rain too much more. But at the end of the day, I think it's important that those people will be prepared to come along in regard to future increases in rates. What they're also nervous about is obviously the value of generals go next year in 2022 for the unimproved capital value, and that will make a big difference. So I think it's important the relativity between what that will do, which is in concrete, that unless you ask him to change it, which is pretty hard to try and do the way the country farms have been selling and that. I think it's important to deal with the people in negotiation in the rural area and come along together. I think in both instances, one can help the other. Council can help them in getting their roads better, and the other one is for to an agreement and go along for the increase in rates. I think it's some good work could be done there.
Any further comments, councillors? Well, councillors, if I could take the opportunity, to make a comment on probably the council term in general. 4 years ago, we all came together through the merger. Some of us weren't keen on the merger, some of us were keen on the merger, but regardless, we worked together over those 4 years to pull it together and make it all happen for our communities and build a new Federation Council. You councillors, you talk about being on council on a council term. it was such a different term. Like, it wasn't about being a normal day-to-day council and a normal council. It was about rebuilding a council. So you had a massive job of actually rebuilding a council, all the departments, putting so much together, and it was huge. And we've seen probably more money than the two councils have ever seen before come through with asset renewal and rebuilds to give I always say, our communities a chance in the future to grow and develop. But I think we've done that extremely well. We've delivered well. The fairness in which the money was put out around the whole Federation Council was unbelievable. But just generally, we've all got different personalities and different ideas. We've been very, very respectful. Today we've come together and I feel we've been united for a long time now. And they say these merged councils take 15 to 16 years to hit the ground and get going. But I think councillors and staff, the way they've worked together, the general manager to pull us all together and make sure that everyone's happening in their own space has been fantastic. It has been absolutely amazing term, and some of you, Councillor Longmire, Councillor Meagle and Councillor Thomas, have decided to have a spell for the next term. We will all miss. We don't know who's going to be in here the next term, but they've openly flagged that. So I just wish them all the very best in what their plans are, and no doubt they're great ones. They could be travel or whatever they're going to do, but they've just added so much to this council and the term. I think we deserve to give them a round of applause. To all you other councillors that are standing again, I wish you all the best. Same thing. It's been a collaborative, and together we've done an amazing job and pulled an amazing council together. And I think you should be proud of yourselves. And that goes for the general manager and staff as well. So thanks very much. Councillor Longmire.
I'm not sure if it's appropriate at this point in time to do a little speech in regard to our retirement. Do you want to leave that for later on, or how do you want?
No, that's okay.
Yeah. Is it okay? I'm not sure if Councillor Thomas, ladies before, gentlemen, if you'd like to say
No,
something.
I'm all good. You go. All good.
Certainly, over my journey, which commenced in March 2004, and so had a look last year. I wasn't sure the numbers were right, but it was nearly 190 meetings of monthly meetings I've attended to, and I don't think I missed one. So that sort of made me look a bit. But see the change in that time of where it's at today has been phenomenal. As I walked in the front today as a councillor for the last time, I looked around, and I think one of in the journey, one of the most important things that we did back as an old council, and I have to refer to that because of the journey, that the acquisition of this building in the location where it is, with this pool where it is now, and the cricket ground and the whole precinct around here for governance and also sport, is pretty unique. And I noticed that we are spending a lot more on tourism, and it is a focus. We know that. We can see it. We've all got a vision to see, in 20 years' time, what everything should be just really good, especially with the caravan park development. But the opportunity at the time to purchase this building, which at the time I called it a flagship for the Shire, and it has become that. That's not taking anything away from Urana, but I think it is a thing where the operation certainly had the room here and the scope. And at the time, we were so lucky to be able to purchase it for 500,000 plus GST. I know there was a few bob spent to upgrade it, but some of these people in the room were licking their chops. They would have liked to have bought it themselves at that time for that sort of money. But I think that's been a real asset for our Shire. And other things that have happened, I know in my journey, the biggest thing that came along was a tornado down at Mulwala, and that was a real worry at that time. But anyway, luckily there were no deaths attributed to that tornado. It could have been if it had been 3 or 4 days later, I think it was, or a week later, around Easter time, I think, Councillor Kennedy, if we remember that at the time. But certainly the bridge, and it still hadn't been built, which is really disappointing. I know I've had a position and all the rest of it on the journey, but it has been noted of late that the not getting that bridge built is just something that, you know, it's hard to imagine where the politicians and what's going on. It just, you know, it's of concern. They're probably the biggest things that came along. I know when they allowed Howlong to come in 2004, the Minister Kelly and the realignment of boundaries, they were 4 years without a representative committee from over there. And I was actually got anointed to chair that representative committee over there. And so that was an interesting time. And certainly it worked, because at that time, Bruce Corcoran, our general manager, you know, leant towards them and gave them a hand and a leg up. And a lot of people say it didn't happen, but it did. It was difficult times. But in the journey with Bruce Corcoran as the former general manager, Chris Gillard as well, and certainly the officers of the time, Ian Rich was the finance operator, then Christy Kay, John Babbs was the engineer, Nigel Sutton was another engineer, and of course Bobby Parr was the planning officer on the journey. So it's been a terrific journey for me in regard to be able to represent council. And yeah, I will miss it, I know that, but I know it's a bit like this PC. I've had a lot of trouble the last couple of times to get it to go, and I'm a bit the same. And so at the end of the day, I compliment the officers, directors that have done a good job to bring it together to where it is today, and certainly the General Manager, Adrian, and you've done a wonderful job. And I congratulate the councillors for that are having another go, and all the best for the future.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm Councillor Meagle.
If I might just indulge the chamber for a minute, or the chamber might indulge me. It's been an honour and a privilege to serve the ratepayers of both the former Kairos Shire and the Federation Council. And during that time, coming into it as fairly unknown, I've had the opportunity for a lot of experiences that and to encounter the organisation that is local government, and the myriad of people that are associated with it both directly and indirectly. I've had a lot of opportunities and experiences that I wouldn't have had I not been a councillor. It was a whole new world. I thank the council staff on both organisations for educating me in all things local government. I have learnt an enormous amount. I've been taught an enormous amount, and I hope I've learnt an equal measure. I'm grateful to the people that I've met and the experiences that I've had over the time. And I admire the skill set of people that in a world that's slightly different to the private sector, and it's something I've had to adjust to over the journey. Council can at times be all-consuming, so I need to publicly thank my wife for her support, and thank my business associates past and present also for their support. I would like to thank the ratepayers for the opportunity and for their support, the council staff for their courtesy and their cooperation, and my fellow councillors past and present for their camaraderie. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's nothing further, Councillor Watchers.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to reply to our outgoing councillors on behalf of the council, but also on behalf of the ratepayers and the people in the towns that you've represented for so long. This merged council took on some new councillors who come in with no experience, but a world of hope and promise that they were going to try and achieve in their term. And as council, we've done some things that we've certainly wanted to. But to be fortunate enough to have in our first merged council 3 mayors, being Burke from Urana and then Councillor Longmore and Councillor Meagle, gave us a pretty big insight and a pretty good footing with experience. And I know for Councillor Thomas and myself, Longley and Kennedy, you really don't know what you're getting yourself into as council. You go in wanting to do it, but when you've got the likes of these people some that we're going to lose today, I think it's not only going to be a loss for any council and this council, because everybody's replaceable, but you can't replace experience and you can't buy it. and you earn that, and that's something that you guys have really brought to the table, particularly Councillor Longmire and Councillor Meagle. And of course, we're saddened to see Councillor Thomas not standing, very passionate about her water and a lot of things that she could bring to the table and help this council through, where we were probably a little bit green in that area, and Councillor Thomas took to that and did really well. So, as I said, not just from the council, I'd like to thank you guys all on behalf of the ratepayers, because as a council you do put a lot of time in, and as Councillor Meagle said, your family life gets affected by it in some shape or form, and I take that on board and I congratulate and thank you all very well. Thank you.
Okay, councillors, if there's no further comments, I think, where are we at?
Yeah, it's okay to put, yep.
We're going to put it all in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried.
7.3, Council, is a report on delegation to the General Manager recommending to authorise the General Manager to exercise the civic and ceremonial functions normally exercised by the Mayor between the 4th of December 2021 until the declaration of the election and the first Mayor elected. So the recommendation is there on that basis. Happy to take any questions or comments.
So moved by Councillor Meagle, seconded by Councillor Kennedy. All in favour? Oh, sorry, Councillor Meagle. Comment.
Mr Mayor, does that mean that the General Manager gets the title of Mayor for that period of time?
Gets the title. Yeah.
Title of Mayor?
I don't think so.
Yeah, deputy. Okay. No, sorry, Sean. Point of order, I'll call a point of order on myself. No? I didn't want to give way. Okay, all in favour?
Aye.
Against, Gary. Thank you.
Thanks. It's over to Director of Corporate.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, councillors. This first report is the financial performance report at the 31st of October 2021. The key highlights in here are that the operating revenue and expenditure are where we'd expect them to be at this stage of the financial year. Our cash holdings are greater than we had budgeted for, and that's as a result of two factors. The first being carry forward works from last financial year that we're delivering this financial year, and additional grant funding that's been received for specific infrastructure projects. So that's effectively a timing difference that we have there. So it's not that council has access to more cash, it's just that there's more cash in the bank account at the 31st of October. The debtors are sitting at $9.2 million, which is down about $700,000 from last year. So that's on track, and capital expenditure is where we'd expect it to be as well. So the report is recommended to you for noting.
Thank you. So moved by Councillor Meagle, seconded by Councillor Law. Any questions or comments, councillors? Councillor Meagle.
Just one, Mr Mayor, to the Director. Are we noticing with the debtors reducing and noticing the rate, the outstanding rates, are they being paid more frequent, more timely? It's probably a question without notice, but is the rate payments improving?
Thanks, Councillor Meagle. Effectively, the payment of rates is pretty consistent with previous years.
Okay.
So, and in the finance report, there is a chart.
Down the bottom.
Yes, which is on. Sorry, I'll just quickly find that page. It's page 36 of the papers.
Yeah.
And that details the total rates that are outstanding by month through the whole financial year, and we compare that to the previous 2 years. And so what we can see is that the trend of where we are this year is consistent with last year and the year before. So,
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? If not, I'll put it all in favour.
Aye.
Against, carried.
8.2 is the quarterly budget review statement for the first quarter of 2021-22. So there are some minor adjustments as recommended in this report, and that's as a result of additional grant funding that has been received for specific projects. And it's primarily the airport funding, but there are some other minor amounts. So that report is for noting and for adoption of the quarterly budget review statement as at the 30th of September 2021.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Thomas, seconded by Councillor Longley. Any questions or comments, councillors? If not, I'll put it. Councillor Meagle.
No. Oh, sorry.
All in favour? Against, carried. Thank you.
So 8.3 we brought forward, so I've already covered off on that item. So if we move on to 8.4, this report presents or provides you with the draft minutes of the Audit Risk and Improvement Committee meeting that was held on the 15th of October 2021 and the final minutes of the previous two meetings, being the 11th of June and the 3rd of September. So they're recommended to you for noting.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Meagle, seconded by Councillor Kennedy. Any questions or comments, councillors? I'll put it. All in favour? Against? Carried.
Agenda item 8.5 relates to the New South Wales Government's new risk management and internal audit framework for local councils. So the Office of Local Government has issued draft guidelines for the new framework and sought input from councils in relation to the what is contained in that framework, and this is the second opportunity we've had to provide a submission. So the draft submission has been prepared and is contained in the papers. In summary, the submission, it notes the benefits to council decision making as a result of the new framework, reiterates the view of council at the last time we considered this, that the Audit Risk and Improvement Committee should have a councillor on board and they should have voting rights in the same way other Audit Risk and Improvement Committee members do. That's not currently in the framework. There's also a request for greater flexibility for the implementation and timing of the implementation of the new framework. Effectively, one size does not fit all councils in New South Wales, and we're requesting greater flexibility to enable us to implement a framework that's of adequate scope and implementation for a council our size. So the recommendation before you is to note the draft guidelines and to note the draft submission that we propose to submit by 26th of November 2021.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Wales, seconded by Councillor Longmire. Questions or comments, councillors? If not, I'll put it. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Agenda item 8.6 refers to the work of the structure of the Federation Arts and Cultural Committee. So a review has been undertaken and now there's a slightly amended terms of reference that is being recommended to Council for adoption. So the recommendation is to note the committee or the report on the committee and adopt the amended terms of reference.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Law, seconded by Councillor Kennedy. Any questions or comments? If not, I'll put it. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Thanks, Joe.
And thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Okay, we'll now move on to the Director of, just lost my place, I'm sorry.
Development.
Development Environmental, Susan.
Yep. 9-1.
Thank you, Mr
Thank
Mayor.
you, Susan.
Item 9.1, councillors, is the construction certificates and compliant development approved under delegation. Happy to take any questions.
Can I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Meagle, seconded by Councillor Longmire. Any questions or comments, councillors? If not, I'll put it. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Item 9.2 is the development applications approved under delegation. Again, happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Meagle, seconded by Councillor Law. Any questions or comments? I'll put it. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Item 9.3, councillors, is the regional and state significant development applications that have been lodged within the council area. We have had some terminations in this area. So for development application 2020-37 for the subdivision and concept development in Mulwala, the panel sat yesterday and determined to refuse the application. And for development application 2021-259 for the solar farm in Mulwala, the panel sat and on the 8th of November they determined to approve that application. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Longmire, seconded by Councillor Law. Any questions or comments, councillors? If not, I'll put it. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Item 9.4, councillors, is a return of the alcohol-free zones to re-establish those, and the recommendation is to re-establish the zones commencing on the 1st of December and ending on the 1st of December 2025.
During the exhibition, we received no submissions whatsoever.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Law, seconded by Councillor Longley. Any questions or comments, councillors? Councillor Longmire.
Yeah, just clarity in regard to Rowers Park area. Significantly, in the report there's a time frame there on New Year's Eve, I think it is.
Yes.
Australia Day. Yeah. So other than that time, is it still not? Are you still not able to have a drink down there?
You can. You need to seek permission, and delegation is with the General Manager to suspend the alcohol-free zone. That needs to be advertised, which can be done on the council website. So people can put in an application if they wish to have an event there.
So that's even outside, say, private people that come across the bridge and might have a picnic lunch there.
That's
and
correct.
all of a
So
sudden
it's an alcohol-free zone.
So it's an alcohol-free. That's quite different because at Noriel Park in Albury, which I've been to many times, that's an opportunity where you can go and have fish and chips any evening in the summertime and have a stubby or whatever can. I find that interesting because I think that does pull away the opportunity for some freedom of, public exercise in that regard. I know where you're coming from and if you talk about the abuse, but it is one that I think is, for all reasons, I think I'm certainly opposed to it. So anyway, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, if the councillors are concerned about that, we can go back out to the police and get comment.
Yeah,
and
if
see
that's available.
If that's an option, we can do further determination.
Yeah, I just wonder, so what we've done now, what we're doing now, is that just a like for like, isn't it? So,
Yeah.
So we've just done a like for like of what always was in place, but I'm thinking more towards the reactivation of all that, or not reactivation, but the further activation with the new pathways and the $2.6 million Crown Lands project all down through there and that precinct, and whether that does enable, and we can do it now, as you said, the grass is all there, you can have a picnic and as in, if someone wanted to, but legally it's never been the case that they've been allowed to.
Not with
current.
Yeah.
Yeah, so to be a re-proposal of that area.
So that's an opportunity.
With the timing, it's probably, I'd recommend we still support this approach, get us through this period and look at that early in the new year though, after Australia Day, and look at because there could be other precincts too where it might be more reasonable to allow casual use, but not an event type approach. It's just a casual use by people that are having a picnic or something like that. So
yeah.
I think that'd be the intent, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Law.
I think the main worry there is glass. If we were to make it a glass-free zone, that would be a lot safer and maybe people could have a drink there, but then you've still got to make sure that people are sensible but I think if it was a glass-free zone, it'd be a lot easier.
I think the urgency of these were running out, weren't they, Susan?
Yeah, so they were meant to cease on the 1st of December this year. So this was just a procedural matter to bring it back through and go through the correct legislative process.
And the other comment would be Councillor Lord even mentioned there not long back the liquor accord and Councillor Whitechurch. That'd be sort of looking at reopening some of those areas for casual alcohol, with private setting would be probably something the liquor accord could positively work on with council as well and say what would it look like? Would it be glass or would it be? Yeah, so I think that's something we can take on board for future.
Well, at the moment there is no liquor accord in the area, and the licensing sergeant tells me that it's the council's responsibility to organise a liquor accord.
We could make a point
Take
too.
that on note.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Longmire, to your point, just wondering whether we could add in point 2 to the recommendation to be looked at. So that's proposed. Yeah, leave it point 1 as it is, and point 2 to
Further consider
after.
Yeah, if that's possible, I'd certainly welcome that.
That would give the new council direction.
Yeah, I think that's the place to go with it. Yeah, absolutely, because, yeah.
So would Councillor Law and Longley?
Would you be happy to do that?
Yeah.
So point 2, Rochelle, would be that council further consider the area of Rowers Park, Corowa, as being considered to allow alcohol consumption further consider the area of Rowers Park, Corowa.
Hot days.
What you think if a private, in a private setting? Is that what you're?
Private setting, yeah.
Yeah. and a report be further, in private settings. And receive a further report on this matter.
In the new year at the end.
Oh, just whenever, we'll leave it, yeah.
All right, happy with that, councillors? Well, I'll put it, all in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan. Would someone like to move that we break now? Thank you, councillor.
I've only got, you've only got a couple, isn't it?
Get on before our time. So, can I have a second, please, councillor Meagle? All in favour?
I won't stay to